Okay, we're back with our special guest, Marvin and Jan. We'd like to turn the questioning over to the young people. Your Highness?
Yes, my son.
I'd like to start out by asking you if you could shed some light on what I'm told is maybe the biggest concert tour in history.
Oh, well, that's very nice. I would like to see that become any eventuality. I'm afraid it's a bit too soon to make such a definite statement, but I would love for that to become true. We've just finished San Diego, and I think we got off to a great start. We did 2 shows there, and it's a bit difficult going back to work. I think I've been off about 7 years or so, something like that. And starting a tour all over again, you got to warm up. So I got to get back in it, lose the weight, sweat, work, the boys, everything has to work. So it's kind of fun, but I'm up for it. I'm very, very much up for it. It's fun, and the reaction was super in San Diego.
Good. I know, I saw it.
Oh, yes, that's right, you were there. That's great.
First question.
What is your latest album out since Sexual Healing?
My latest album since Sexual Healing? Well, that's a nice question. I imagine CBS would like to know too at this moment. But we're working on something. Yes, sweetheart. Actually, we did. We're planning something kind of hot again in the Sexual Healing vein, but we thought we'd do something a bit more social for the next album. So perhaps you might want to look for something a bit more social, but maybe something hot. I don't know. I don't know. Soon.
Yes, I was wondering. I'm Lisa. You're getting back into your, career, hitting it hot, once again, as always. I was curious as to know, what is it that motivates you to really, do that? Just suddenly, wow, I'm going to do it.
Well, as strange as it might seem, many people take on different appearances when they're performing, but they might be quite good living human beings. I'm not saying that.
Peace and blessings to you, Sister Vanette.
But what motivates me primarily is my love for my purpose. I don't quite know what that is.
Peace,
I just know
Brother
that I'm a singer and I'm an artist, and I owe the world whatever I owe the world. I feel it very strongly in my heart and soul. I love God. I'm a few people. I'm a bit schizophrenic sometimes. Some people call me a hypocrite. Some people say that you're a sinner and you're not a saint, and they talk about my lyrics, but I try and do the best I can. But I can tell you truthfully right here, I love Jesus Christ and I love God, and He motivates me, and that is what makes me go. Thank you.
Hi, Marv. My name is Terry Stanton.
Hello, Terry.
How you doing? I would like to ask you, is there any kind of spiritual advice that you could give to all the young artists that are just now approaching that, artistry industry? Is there any kind of advice that you can give to all of us?
Yeah, well, when I first started, you're a pretty young guy. I started when I was about, I think I took a shot at it around 17. I made a vow at that point in my life that I wouldn't, I'd either become a star or I wouldn't be anything. I mean, you kind of sort of, as far as I'm concerned, when there's something that you love, be it athletics or whatever it is, you dedicate yourself young and early, and you sort of say you want to be the greatest, the best, and you keep striving. Maybe you never reach it, but you never know. You might end up one day being the very best. And I made that decision many years ago that I would either be in show business or I wouldn't be in anything, and I did nothing. I just went around and I tried to sing and said I'm an artist. I don't care if I'm hungry, if I'm poor, if I starve. I don't care. I'm not doing anything. I'm doing music. I love it. It's my life. And I pray God somebody help me make it. So that's the kind of attitude. If you have that sort of attitude in any endeavor, I'm sure you'll be successful, but you gotta have that attitude, I think, in whatever field of endeavor you might try to enter or whatever.
Okay. Thank you. Marvin, tell us about your new single.
Well, the new single is, we've taken it from the Midnight Love album. It's called Turn On Some Music, and interestingly enough, we did this one time down. Harvey Fuqua was in the studio, and we had done some other lyrics. So he said, just come off the top of your head with something, the way James Brown. James told me sometimes he's in the studio and he just comes off the top. He said, "I'll let the music play. I'm just gonna sing what comes to my head." So we
Ice Cube Daddy.
totally took what we had on and we put this new thing on the record that was off the top of my head. So we did it in one
Ice
take.
Block.
And, that's what we kept. So that's how Turn On Some Music came about.
Give us a take now.
I'd love
Chip
to.
off the old block.
Marvin Gaye.
Thank you.
All right. Now, let's get into it. The chapter is called The Dance. Do the Jerry Girl. The Dance. Here we go. If a man threatens you, you call the police. You seek protection. You leave him. You have nothing to do with him ever again. You preserve your safety by putting great distance between him and you. Your course of action is clear. Only insanity will allow you to continue the relationship. Reflecting back to 1979, when I was 23 years old, I have no doubt that I was, in fact, insane. So was Marvin. One definition of insanity: doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, applied to virtually all my actions. The dance looked like this. Marvin lost his cool. He cursed me. He threatened violence. I left. Marvin called to apologize. He sent flowers. He promised to change. He said that he'd been on his knees all night asking for forgiveness. Peace, Hebrew servant. He wrote songs in which he pleaded to me, "If God in heaven can forgive me, why can't you?" I forgave. Reconciliation was forged. Romance was renewed. Sex happened. Sex wasn't satisfying. The dance recommenced. The cycle started anew. This crazy cycle drained me of all self-confidence. I couldn't trust Marvin's sanity any more than I could trust my own commitment to avoid him at all costs. When he was stark raving mad, it was easy to stay away. But when he reemerged as his charming self, filled with love for me and the children, I'd watch my resistance melt like butter in the sun. At the same time, I had life-threatening problems of my own. My own drug addiction was dragging me down. At one point, out on tour with Marvin while the kids were back in L.A., I broke down completely. All that cocaine flipped me out. I locked myself in the hotel room and swallowed a fistful of antidepressants. I OD'd. One of Marvin's security men had to knock down the door and rush me to the hospital. Were it not for my dear friend Barbara Stroom, who came running to my aid, I would have never made it. It was Barbara, not Marvin, who got me on my feet again. I needed my mother, and thank God my mother was there for me. The kids and I moved into her place in Hermosa Beach at the same time Marvin lost possession of both the studio on Sunset and the sprawling estate in Hidden Hills. His world was falling apart. I struggled to keep my world intact. It was summertime. I took the children to the beach practically every day. My mother was a conscientious and loving grandmother. I desperately needed her help. She was also my drug buddy. Mom lived on 14th Street in a funky green beach house right on the Strand. There were 2 bedrooms and a sunroom and barely enough room for everyone. But it was home, my only safe haven. Mom's collection of odd male friends came and went. Some were sweet, some were strong, some provided the household with dope. Mom did her best to shelter us. She warned me to keep Marvin at bay. How can I asked. He's their father. From time to time, Marvin drove to Hermosa to visit the children. They adored him, and he adored them. For an hour or two or three, the world was at peace. The world was wonderful. But then the attention would turn to me. During one trip, he said he never wanted to see me again. During another, right on, Mike Jr. During another, he said he couldn't live without me. I believed him one day and disbelieved him the next. I wanted to reconcile. I didn't want to reconcile. I loved him. I hated him. I hated myself for loving him. I hated myself for hating him. My sense of self was completely shattered by the viciousness of his assaults and my nasty self-assaults. One day, in the midst of my emotional devastation, I came back from an afternoon with the kids at the beach. "You got a call," said my mother. "Who from?" I asked. "Teddy Pendergrass." You checking this out? "What did he want?" "I presume," said Mom, "he wants you." Overstand this. Okay. She is groomed for this. My understanding, I don't recall if it was Doll's Way or Sister Lorraine, but I either saw it in the chat last time or in the comment section. Somebody was saying how when Marvin Gaye finally got his Grammy for Sexual Healing, Rick James presents the Grammy to Marvin Gaye, and Janice is at the Grammy Awards with Rick James for the night. So we'll find her in the Rick James book with Rick James. And now we finna find out she with Teddy Pendergrass. And she was with Frankie Beverly. Okay. Yeah, that's right, Linbon. What? That's right. Okay. Let's continue. It says here. He said, "What did he want?" "I presume," said Mom, "he wants you." Mom was right. Teddy wanted to see me. I asked my mother to set up the date. I had met Teddy earlier, side-eye, through my best friend Barbara Strong, who also introduced me to Shep Gordon, Teddy's manager. Barbara and I spent an afternoon with Teddy at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. He was a fascinating man. He was rough around the edges, but he had a charm all his own. His self-confidence was a large part of his sexiness. He also had enormous amounts of blow. She telling everybody, ain't she? Another reason Barbara and I were pleased to spend time in his company. See, her characters, she's not painting a good picture of her own. I understand it. Anyway, I was excited that he wanted to see me alone. He always excited, along with some drugs and some sex involved. I'm sorry. She was traumatized. She was traumatized. Marvin, you're the blame. And her mama. I was excited that he wanted to see me alone. All the pain inflicted by Marvin was gone, at least for the moment. I was wanted. I was worthy. Teddy had his choice of any woman in the world, and he had chosen me. How could I not feel good about myself? That's right, Judge Lynn. Surely Marvin would find out, and when he did, he'd have to face the truth that other men, famous and powerful men, desired me. The truth would hurt him. But wasn't that what he wanted? Didn't he want to suffer deeper pain? Wasn't he the one who predicted that Teddy, the man seen as his successor, would replace Frankie Beverly as my next lover? Didn't he speak of the scenario as something he hoped would happen? Didn't he relish the prospect? Well, I relished the fact that Teddy had called. Teddy was interested. Teddy wanted you to turn him off so he could take him off. Teddy was asking that I meet him back at his suite at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. I dressed in brown suede palazzo pants and a matching midi coat. I was feeling good. I was feeling confident. I was feeling sexy, but not sexy enough to give it up in this first meeting. Please. And what you come out here for? I got off the elevator on Teddy's floor. Walking down the hall, I passed by a woman who had obviously just come from Teddy's room. We purposely ignored each other. I knocked on Teddy's door. "Well, hello," said Teddy, dressed casually in a sports shirt and jeans. He was tall and devilishly handsome. His beard was trimmed close to his face. His eyes were smiling. I saw that he was high on coke. I decided to take a chance and speak my mind. "Wasn't that LaToya Jackson who I passed in the hallway?" "Oh!" "It was. We're old friends." He was unapologetic about LaToya's visit. He was unapologetic about everything. "So glad you could make it," he told me. "I've been thinking about you ever since we met." It was a line, but I liked it. I liked the praise. That's why you easy like a Sunday morning. I needed the praise. Teddy and I fell into easy conversation. He was delighted to hear that I could talk intelligently about the music business. He saw that I had superb taste in artists and songs. That's all she got to bargain with, that and herself. Huh? He liked that I was funny, articulate, and candid. Within no time, I had Teddy completely charmed, spellbound. He couldn't keep his eyes off me. He listened carefully to my every word, yet he made no move. I was both impressed and disappointed. I was certain that he'd expect sex and was prepared to deny him that pleasure. Instead, he exhibited the behavior of a perfect gentleman. After an hour, he thanked me for dropping by, but unfortunately had to prepare for a business meeting. He excused himself. I got up to leave. "Before you go, though," he said, "why don't we share a little treat?" He brought out a vial and laid out several lines on a small mirror. "Ladies first," he said. Sound like a love TKO. I snorted up as much of the cocaine as I could. It was mighty strong. Yeah, he's trying to knock you out. I wondered whether he would now make his move. He did not. Instead, we chatted a few more minutes before saying goodbye. He gave me a hug, not a kiss. I drove back to Hermosa Beach in a state of happy confusion. I wondered, is that it for me and Teddy? He waited a day before calling me again. "How about if I drive down there and took you to dinner?" he asked. "Would love it," I said. He showed up in a big black Mercedes, came to the door, met Mom and Nona and Frankie. Again, the perfect gentleman. We shared a joint as we drove up to Beverly Hills, where he had reserved a table by the window at the Mandarin restaurant on Rodeo Drive. The place was super sophisticated. Fabulous floral arrangements, soft lighting, exotic cuisine. We ordered cocktails. "I'm excited to see you again," said Teddy. "You look beautiful tonight." I was moved by the flattery, coming from the man a million love-starved women called the teddy bear. In the crazed soul disco era of the late 70s, Teddy stood tall as Black America's new romantic dreamboat. He was also one of the only men self-confident enough to ask me out. Others were intimidated by Marvin, but not Teddy. I was excited to be out in public with him. "I'm glad you called," I said. "I had no choice," said Teddy. "I couldn't get you off my mind." Sounds like a Teddy Pendergrass song. It's the truth. I smiled before Teddy, looking surprised, said, Hey, Jan, Marvin just cruised by this restaurant. It couldn't have been. Jan, I know what Marvin Gaye looks like. How could he know we've been here? He's obviously been following you. I shook my head and sighed. Marvin, I said to myself, what is wrong with you? Why do you do this to yourself? Don't worry, Jan, said Teddy. I'm not afraid of Marvin. Let him shadow us all he wants. As long as you're comfortable with me, I'm comfortable with you. Comfort was one of the many emotions I was feeling. Teddy did make me comfortable. I was impressed that he was not bothered by the fact that Marvin was stalking us. I also couldn't deny feeling some satisfaction that Marvin now undoubtedly knew that Teddy was pursuing me. Let Marvin see that other men saw me differently than he did. Let him see that other men, unlike him, were eager to praise me to the sky and lure me to bed. Let him see that I could lead my life without him. Let him see that I was finally free of his control. Let him drive by the restaurant 2 or 3 more times before the meal was over. Let him do whatever the hell he wants to do. I'm going to stand my ground. But when Marvin returned and parked his car right in front of the restaurant, I couldn't take it anymore. Would you mind if we left? I asked Teddy. Not at all. We went out the back door and Teddy drove me back to my mom's house in Hermosa. He saw me inside and had a nice chat with Mom. Unlike Marvin, he treated her like a queen. He gave me a sweet kiss goodnight, and that was it. My next date with Teddy was more intimate. The next time, he had a luxurious suite at the L'Hermitage Hotel. I was ready, snorting copious amounts of cocaine. I was happy to fly high over my doubts and confusions. I was willing to let the big man have his way with me, not just for a few hours, but all night and all morning. Time out for food, time out for blow, but then back to bed. Talking, sleeping, loving, snorting, drinking, and loving some more. 2 days and 2 nights in Teddy's suite. When it was over, he said, "We've got a good thing. Too good to stop." Was all I could say. I wanted to believe him. I'll leave tomorrow for New York, but I'll be calling you. I'm doing a gig at Chino for the lady prisoners. It's a captive audience. Terrible joke, I said. Sorry, but come to the show with me. I have 2 kids to look after. You'll bring the kids with you. I love kids. I want you and the kids to come to all my shows. Teddy was true to his word. He sent me and the kids first-class tickets to come to his concerts in faraway cities. Once he had me meet him at the Brown Palace in Denver. While Teddy was at rehearsal, the phone rang. It was Frankie Beverly. I know you're with Teddy, he said. I know Teddy from back in Philly. You need to get out of there. You're in the wrong place with the wrong guy. I ignored Frankie and stayed put. It turned out to be a wonderful weekend. Back in L.A., we'd pile into Teddy's roles, and he'd take me and the kids to Universal Studios. Isn't that ironic, Sweet Lady 0512? He loved visiting us in Hermosa Beach. There were times when I saw Marvin's car parked down the street from my mom's house, but I paid Marvin no mind. I had moved on. If Marvin wanted to torture himself, that was his business. When Teddy played the Greek Theater in L.A., I couldn't make the show. Later he told me that Marvin had sent him 12 red roses, all dead. Teddy laughed it off. He's obsessed with you, I told Teddy. No, he's obsessed with you, Teddy told me. He'll always be obsessed with you. He'll always want you back. You just have to find the strength to resist. You have to keep him away. But how was it possible when he was the father of our children? A mother in possession of her full sanity would see that keeping her children away from a father like Marvin would be an act of protection, not punishment. I was not that mother. I was acting out my anger at Marvin by juggling affairs with both Frankie Beverly and Teddy Pendergrass, knowing that both men had other women. And when Rick James, whose Fire It Up was the hottest album in the country, came to call, I found myself forging a friendship with still another superstar whom Marvin viewed as a competitor. What a coincidence. All of the people that he is obviously intimidated by, she happens to link up with. This sounds like handler business, mind control business, things to keep the artist off kilter, or things to keep them chasing after this muse. There's a way that they believe that they can pass around, and thank you, Sister Minister Rebecca, for this. There's a way that they will believe that they can pass around the same woman. You wonder, why do they all want Amber Rose? Or why do they all go after Kim Kardashian? They will believe like this. Okay, Marvin Gaye was with Jan Gaye. They will believe that a part of his soul was tied to her soul. And so they will want to have sex with her in order to pick up on part of his soul. They're soul singers too, all of them fledglings. Frankie Beverly, Teddy Pendergrass, and Rick James. They was all new jacks on the come up to this old school legend. We cannot discredit and discount how legendary he was. So for them, Michael Jackson came over to see the guy, okay? He was a young guy, a new jack, a fledgling coming up. So for all of them, they're looking at him like, oh wow, he's got the mojo, he's got the magic. Well, how can we ever get it from him? We can't. However, we can sap some of the energy that he's left on and in his woman. That sounds weird and crazy. That's one of the ways they get down. Let's continue. Okay. It says, the attention and praise lavished upon me by these men kept me from sinking into a deep depression. Thank you, Judge Lynn. They boosted my sense of self-worth. They kept me high. And yet underneath, I was miserable. My marriage had fallen apart. My husband was falling apart. I was falling apart. My family was falling apart. Energy vampirism. Very, very, very well summarized. Right on. Right on, Leonard of Judah. And right on, Shebrew servant. Right, they leave deposits in the extraction. Right on. I entertained the hope that my marriage, husband, and family could all be saved. That hope was sparked when Marvin called. He was not manic. He was mellow. Mellow Marvin was beautiful Marvin. Loving Marvin, sweet Marvin, soft-spoken, well-mannered Marvin. The Marvin I had met 6 years earlier, who was all charm and graciousness, a man in tune with his heart, a man whose soul radiated warmth. Dear, he said, we need to talk. I need to come down there to Mercer. We need to discuss our relationship. We need to get it together. I don't know, I said. I do. I clearly see what I need to do. I have a lot of making up to do. Marvin, don't argue, Jan. Just listen to reason. It is reasonable to allow your husband to visit you with a plan for reconciliation. It is reasonable to let your children enjoy the company of their father. It is reasonable to assume that love, pure love, deep love, everlasting love, is strong enough to heal even the deepest wounds. It is reasonable to believe in God and the undeniable truth that God wants all together, happy, strong, and united. How can you argue with that? I couldn't. Peace to you, Brother Jonathan. Always a blessing. Good night. Thank you for joining us. Okay. Says, okay, war. Last chapter for the night. War. Avoid war at all costs. Do anything to protect my children and myself from the fallout of a romance turned rancid. Stay away from any encounter with a man seething with anger. I felt his hunger for reconciliation. To resist reconciliation was to risk a chance to finally make things right. I need to go back to him, I told my mother. Don't, said Mom. He's playing you. Let go. I couldn't. I had to hold on to hope. I had to see Marvin again and allow visitations with our children. Once we agreed to visitations, Marvin showed up in Hermosa at a time when I wasn't home. He greeted Mom, who was caring for the children, with great contempt. He played with the kids for a short time and then took little Frankie with him. "What are you doing?" asked Mom. "I'm taking my son." Before Mom could object, Marvin and Frankie were gone. Mom was alarmed, but there was nothing she could do. Nona was devastated. Her dad had taken her brother and left her behind. No wonder she looked so sad in the eyes. A half hour later, he returned for Nona and whisked her away too. Lord have mercy. When I returned home, my children were gone. Now the game had suddenly changed. Now the children were in play. Marvin was using the children to wound me, just as my affairs had wounded Marvin. More than feeling wounded, I was feeling frightened, even terrified. I didn't feel that Marvin would harm his children, but I worried that he'd never return them to me. Marvin took Nona and Frankie to the home he had bought his parents on Gramercy Place in an old neighborhood in mid-city LA. The house was huge. The kids had their own bedrooms and a large yard to play in. Marvin's mom was a doting grandmother. Nona and Frankie were made to feel safe there. After a couple of days, Marvin called me to say, "I have an out-of-town gig. Please, come and get your children." His voice was calm. When I arrived, the kids were happy to see me, but disappointed that they wouldn't be going on the road with their dad, where his entourage spoiled them to no end. "Thank you for letting me take care of our babies," Marvin told me with seeming sincerity. "They missed you something terribly. They needed their mom." I was comforted by Marvin's words. I was convinced that when he was right, and today he seemed very right, I had been right not to throw a fit when he took the kids. I was right to keep cool. "When I get back to LA," Marvin said with his customary cool, "I'll come down to Hermosa and we'll have that talk I've been wanting to have. Is that okay with you, dear?" "I'd like that," I said. "There's no reason not to be civilized, especially when the children are involved." "Civilization is based on mutual respect," Marvin added. "And the great civilizations are built on love. I'm always going to follow the path of love." A week later, Marvin followed the path to Hermosa Beach. I was careful to make sure Mom left before he arrived. The animosity between my mother and husband would have only harmed the chances of a harmonious meeting. In the first minute of the meeting, though, I realized harmony wasn't happening. Marvin was coked up. I was too. That's right, Sister Julie. Low down. "I can't talk to you in this house," he said. "It's filled with your mother's evil spirit. If we're going to talk, it's going to have to be outside." I suggested that we take a walk to the beach. We had no choice but to bring Nona and Bubby with us. Eager to get to the beach, the kids ran ahead. "It's over, Jan," Marvin blurted out. "It's been over for months. I'm no longer fooling myself about who you are and what you want to do to me. I have no choice but to save my own soul. I'm out. I want a divorce. And I want it quickly. We can go to Vegas." Okay, so he's admitting that they did actually get married. Well, I'm glad you appreciate it, Sister Damali. Okay. It says, "I want a divorce and I want it quickly. We can go to Vegas." Feeling Marvin's manic mood, I didn't want to provoke him. "Can we talk about cooperating?" "There's no cooperating with you." "I don't want to argue with you, Marvin." "Then don't." "I'll agree to a divorce, but not before we work out the financial details." "What details?" Marvin screamed. "There are no details. You deserve nothing. You'll get nothing." I started to cry. "And how will the children live?" I asked. "They'll live with me. The courts will see to that. You're an unfit mother. The courts will see you as the slut that you are, and that mother of yours." Shut up, the kids can hear you. I'm going to have my children no matter what, Marvin insisted. The kids were further down the beach, oblivious to what was happening. Marvin's fury had unleashed my own rage. Just leave us alone, I screamed. Just get the hell out of our lives and stay out. Marvin snapped. He pushed me, and I fell onto the sand. Marvin was all over me, straddling my chest, talking about how we could both die right here on this beach. Hearing the commotion, the kids ran to us. They were hysterical. Marvin grabbed Bubby's right hand, and I grabbed his left, and we started pulling the poor boy in opposite directions. Have mercy. A neighbor called the police. A squad car was in close proximity. Within a minute or two, four cops were forcing Marvin off of me. He resisted, but was quickly restrained. He cursed them wildly. One of the policemen punched Marvin in the eye. All I want is my son, he screamed. I lost the page. This woman won't let me have my son. Nona heard this. Nona couldn't stop crying. Marvin was hauled off, thrown in the squad car, taken to jail. I remained dazed, devastated. Within hours, Marvin was bailed out. The next day I learned that he and his mother were driven to Las Vegas, where a fighter in whom Marvin had invested heavily, Andy the Hawk Price, was facing Sugar Ray Leonard. Before the bout, Marvin and Mother Gay attended Diana Ross's big show at Caesar's Palace, where they ran into Berry Gordy. Marvin had a huge shiner, black eye. Word had it that if Price could beat Leonard, Marvin's financial problems would be dramatically lessened. But his problems, emotional as well as financial, were dramatically increased when Sugar Ray knocked out Andy Price in the first 3 minutes of the first round. Marvin was down and out. A week later, Marvin was frantically calling me again. You sent your daddy Earl out to kill me, he said. Earl's not trying to kill you, I said. But he's looking for me, isn't he? He doesn't have to look. He knows where you are, but I'd never let him hurt the father of my children. I don't believe that, said Marvin. Believe what you want, but stay away. There's a restraining order. If you come back to Hermosa, you'll be arrested. If Earl isn't looking for me, someone else is. You've got gangbanger friends. You've got gangbanger lovers. You've got gangbangers hunting me down. You're paranoid. You're paranoid out of your GD mind. You got to get help. It was clear that Marvin was sinking into spells of insanity. And yet, how could I call it insanity when Marvin sent me songs that he was recording? Beautiful new songs filled with remorse and pleas for reconciliation. I hate that Love Man album, he told me. I'm keeping some of the tracks, but none of the lyrics. They meant nothing. Instead, I'm writing about the state of the world, the state of my soul, and the state of our relationship. My point is to repair the relationship. Listen to the music, and you will hear my heart. I was unable to listen to Marvin's music without falling in love all over again. One song called Praise, okay, these would be the songs that would be on in our lifetime. One song called Praise was just that, an open invitation to praise the God of love every day in every way. It was among Marvin's most uplifting anthems. Heavy Love Affair was a synopsis of everything that had been right and wrong about his relationship with me. He sang about loving the pleasure sweetly, but also loving the pain as deeply. He sang about how he thought of me every day and in all kinds of ways, hating me, loving me, obsessing over me. But the obsession was more than personal or romantic. The obsession concerned the apocalypse. It was clear that his early religious upbringing, first learned at the feet of his father, had come back to haunt him. He told me that these were the end days. The world was on the brink of destruction. In Our Lifetime was the key song in this suite, a question that referred to the annihilation of the planet. Will it happen? in our lifetime. If it was going to happen, as Marvin increasingly believed, then all we could do was live and play and laugh and be happy. All we could do was make love every day. Since the end of the world was just around the corner, Revelation's prophecy nearly fulfilled, he sang in a song called Love Party. All we could do is celebrate the here and now. As much as he tried, Marvin could not reconcile the two sides of his nature, or for that matter, mankind's nature. The spirit and the flesh were at war. God and the devil were at war. War raged within Marvin's heart and soul. In a song he would eventually call Life is for Learning, he saw himself in the role of the suffering artist. The artist pays the price, he sang, so you don't have to pay. We just have to listen to what the artist has to say. What did Marvin have to say? Return to love. Return to God. Bring out the best in your character. Praise the power that can heal all wounds. Believe in that power. When I heard those songs, even in half-completed form, I realized what Marvin's violent behavior had made me forget, that he was a genius. I felt his genius being expressed in not simply a single voice of indescribable sweetness, but in many voices, all of which were woven in a tapestry of enchanting harmony. Marvin's musical expression broke me down, broke down my animosity for all the ways he had hurt me, broke down my vow to protect our children from his presence, broke down my pledge to Mom and Earl that I would never again respond to his overtures for reconciliation. In short, to hear Marvin sing was to forgive him. Any man who sang so soulfully must possess a loving soul. Any man who sang so lovingly must be incapable of living without love. Marvin required love. Every song he sang said so. Marvin required my love, Nona's love, Frankie's love. I'm going back to Hawaii, Marvin told me during one of our midnight phone calls. When? Tomorrow. Why? It's all over for me here. The house, the studio, all my money, my family's gone. My spirit is depleted. Hawaii is the only place where I've ever been able to find peace. Hawaii will be salvation. When I get settled, I'll send for you and the children. By then I know you will have forgiven me for all the suffering I caused. By then, all will be well. God will be served. We will be together. I will see you in Hawaii, Jan. Until then, just remember, I love you, and I always will. I spoke the words that I had sworn never to say again. I love you too, Marvin. Always. And that should be sufficient for the night. So, I think that should conclude our reading for the night. And I appreciate you all for listening in as long as you did. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. We're about to have a revolt. One more chapter. One more chapter. Put your ears on. After this, I'm gone. Escalation. Escalation is the name of the chapter. Could you tell us another bedtime story, please? Please? All right, kids. You get to bed. I'll get the storybook. All tucked in? All right. In the album eventually, here we go. In the album eventually titled In Our Lifetime, Marvin wrote a song he called Love Me Now or Love Me Later. I heard it as Marvin's version of the creation myth. Yes, it is. For the album cover, Marvin commissioned an artist to draw a twin version of himself. Good Marvin with angelic wings and a halo sits across from evil Marvin, with horns on his head and a black cape around his body. They are engaged in a life and death chess game in the clouds. Beneath them, the planet is being destroyed in a nuclear holocaust in our lifetime. At the end of the 70s, as I watched him escape once again to Hawaii, this was Marvin's version of himself and the world in which he felt trapped. He was filled with love. He was filled with hate. He was filled with hope. He was filled with despair. He was filled with creative energy. He was filled with destructive energy. There was nothing he wanted more than reconciliation with me. There was nothing he wanted more than ongoing warfare with me. I wanted him to forgive me, but I kept up the ridiculous and destructive behavior. I kept making the same mistakes. At least she does take some responsibility for her actions. Peace and blessing to you, big nephew Drew from Chi-Town. As he says, going to visit, worship, and pray from what will soon be my former Catholic grandma. Oh, really? Right on. Well, you do enjoy that time spent with the grand matron, with the elder. It's a blessing. Out of thy father and thy mother, so your days will be long. It's grandmother too. Great grandma too, if you got that. Excellent. That's a blessing. And it's always good when we see elders who are able to grow. That's a blessing. All right. It says, when Marvin called me to come to Hawaii with the kids, it was the loving Marvin that I heard. The Marvin who expressed his great need for us. But when I arrived, it was the angry Marvin who greeted me. He wanted details of my current affairs. There were no details to report. My relationships with Frankie Beverly and Teddy Pendergrass were mere diversions. They involved lust, not love, and had run their course. What about Rick James? He's my friend, not my lover, I said truthfully. And you expect me to believe you? The only thing I expect of you, Marvin, is to make good on your promise to try and bring us all back together. My words had an impact on him. He wanted peace. He and I walked on the beach, swam with the kids, watched the glorious sunsets. There were a few days of calm, a few nights when intimacy was restored. My sweet Marvin was back. We rented a condo in Kihei, and went for long, so I got sneezed the first time, and went for long drives around the island. We hung out at Longhees in Lahaina with John McVie of Fleetwood Mac and visited friends in the hills. We moved from Kihei to Kanapali and went house hunting with George Benson. I know that's wrong. Ali, and went house hunting with George Benson, who already owned 3 properties on the island. 3 properties. Ooh. He urged Marvin to move to Maui. I'd love to, Marvin said. I feel like it's definitely in my future. Optimism returned. Our hearts filled with hope, but then, like the purple sun sinking into the ocean, hope vanished. We couldn't escape the darkness. Was it the drugs? Probably, because he and I kept getting high. Was it Marvin's ongoing battle with chronic depression? Was it my similar battle with acute depression? There were prolonged periods of darkness that separated us from everyone and everything. Whatever it was, Marvin moved from mellow to manic, then from manic to violent. His arguments with me got physical again. I feared for my life. I prepared to flee with my children. You're not taking them anywhere, he insisted. They're staying here with me. I was terrified, confused. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave without my children, but Marvin was adamant. Then he offered a compromise. Take Nona back with you said Marvin, but Frankie stays with me. At first, I rejected the offer. I also saw the pain that the compromise was inflicting on Nona. Right, so that Nona can be raised with you and your witch mother up in the prostitute coven for entertainers, and then so Marvin can raise up the boy in the ways of the gay boule, huh? Lord have mercy. Says, I wanted both my children, but Marvin, at first I rejected the offer. I also saw the pain that the compromise was inflicting on Nona. Marvin wanted his son, but was willing to lose his daughter. That's the sadness. Rejection, abandonment. I wanted both my children, but Marvin wouldn't let me have them. Lacking the resources to hire a lawyer, I reluctantly accepted the proposal. Openly weeping, I embraced my son. I could barely speak the words. Be a good boy, Bubby. Listen to your father. Say goodbye to your mother, said Marvin. You won't be seeing her for a long time. Not too long, I told Marvin. We can't foresee the future, said Marvin. Back in L.A., living with my mom and Nona, I grew more fearful that my son was not safe. Word came down that Marvin was growing more despondent. His money had run out completely. He was down to begging old friends like Smokey Robinson for loans. A week later, another report came back from Maui. Unable to pay the rent, Marvin was evicted from his condo. He and Frankie were living in an abandoned Helms bakery truck. I've got to go back over there, I told my dad, Earl. I've got to go get Bubby. I know Marvin, said Earl. He won't give up his son voluntarily. Your only chance is to go over there with a court order, and that's going to take time. I started those proceedings, but they were slow going. For every step forward, there were 2 steps back. Because I was high a good deal of the time, I just couldn't put it together. Another report from Maui. Jeffrey Kruger, a big-time promoter out of London, had traveled to Hawaii to convince Marvin to tour Europe. It was Kruger who called me with the news. Your son is safe, said the Englishman, and he is eating well. He looks fine. His father, however, looks terrible. Marvin is close to a complete breakdown. I suggested that we immediately fly you over here to care for Bubby, but Marvin has flat out refused. So I've convinced him to allow me to send for his mother. I was both relieved and crushed. Relieved that Frankie was all right, crushed that I could not come to claim him. I continued to work through my lawyer as Kruger prepared Marvin for his European tour. When Mother Gay arrived from the mainland, she, Marvin, and Frankie moved into a condo in the town of Lahaina. Kruger also brought over Marvin's band, led by Gordon Banks, a fine guitarist who had married Marvin's sister Ziola. Frantic phone calls from me, concerned about my son's welfare, went unanswered. Marvin had instructed his mom not to speak to me. Only Kruger kept me in the loop. The winter of 1980 had come and gone. Kruger returned to London. Realizing that Marvin required more time to build up his strength, he postponed the tour. In the spring, Marvin went into a recording studio in Honolulu to work on what was once Love Man and was now In Our Lifetime. His philosophical, theological writings continued. Money for production came from Motown, which was clamoring for the release of the record. It had been 3 years since the commercially unsuccessful Hear My Dear. Berry Gordy had done nothing but pour money into Marvin. Marvin had squandered and mismanaged that money. He was on the verge of being indicted by the IRS. I was on the verge of losing it. I had to see my son. I had to get him back. I had to find a way. After months, good news. My lawyers persuaded the Superior Court of California to issue a writ of habeas corpus. In June, when Marvin was due to fly into Los Angeles to change planes for London, he would be served and forced to give up Bubby. I'd have my son back. But someone tipped off Marvin's mother about my plan, and Mother Gay tipped off Marvin. To avoid the writ, he avoided L.A. and instead flew into San Francisco. I was enraged, but there was nothing to do. Even though Marvin had lost his passport, Kruger managed to convince the authorities to allow him and Bubby to leave the country and make the transatlantic journey. In June of 1980, Marvin and Bubby arrived in London along with an entourage that included Mother Gay. Having failed to reclaim my son, I fell into despair, the deepest and scariest of my life. And the next chapter that we will read next week is called The Pipe. And thank you for listening in tonight. Amen. Much love to y'all. Right on, Big Nephew Ronell. Yes, much love to everybody. In Jesus' Master's holy name, just pray that everyone has a peaceful morning. If you're going to service, enjoy service. And practically apply that which you've learned tonight to help make someone else's life a little bit more bright. In the power and authority of the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. We touch and agree and call it done. Yes. See you Wednesday, everyone. Peace and blessings to you, Chocolate. Let's ride. Now let's after that there. I can't even think of what Marvin I would play, but something from In Our Lifetime, maybe. No, I'm not gonna do that. Let's clear the air after we heard all that foolishness. Yep. So I thank you all again. And again, we look at this story because we're looking at evidence of the mind control program. We're looking at evidence of women being groomed for use by the men in the business, men passing around these same women, a systematic form of mind control and pimping that has come to be known as stage prostitution. Was also going on both for the male and female acts. So we've decided to look into a couple of behind-the-scenes stories and do some deep diving by reading those behind-the-scenes stories and seeing what we can glean. And I wanted to start with Marvin Gaye and Janice Gaye because of our study of Project Janice and the Hermetic theaters or the Hermetic plot to create another you, a double you. A double U consists of three V's. So a way to make a 666, a number of the man, to make another U, a double U. And so we looked into Project Janice, and I thought about Marvin Gaye, and I thought about the name of his autobiography, Divided Soul, and how many things seem to be pointing toward this mind control program having a presence in his life. And I thought about Janice, and I wanted to see how they hooked up because I had no idea. I didn't remember exactly the details outside of she happened to show up in the studio. This is how Divided Soul tells it. She just happens to show up in the studio one day, and Marvin is smitten by her. But thank goodness that we have a clearer picture here, that there's something more systemic and orchestrated going on behind the scenes. And if it happened with one, it may have happened with many. And so that's why we're reading After the Dance. And that's why we're going to read Glow and Respect, if I can ever get the Monties to let it go. I still gotta go up there. I was trying to avoid that. Yes, I was trying to avoid that. Well, maybe we'll say, oh, for the end, maybe we'll do this. For the end, we'll do this. Got to blame the aunties. That's all they work up there. They don't hire no men.
People go around doing the same old things, living a life, junkies passing on by. People go around.
I'm looking forward to getting it in the mail at this point.
playing the same old games. God's got
I'm
time
about to order the men here.
of the same old scene.
Peace and blessings to you.
People go
Thank you,
around
Big Nephew Drew, for the prayer.
doing the
I
same
touch
old
and agree with
things,
you.
living
I'm sorry I missed your request.
junkies passing on by.
Y'all, I don't like Al Green's version as much as I like this other version.
Playing the same old games.
But I will play that.
What a time to catch up with you. If you're not ready, you won't know what to do. You'll be like all the others, trying to find a hiding place. Jesus told me to tell you, but then it would be too late. Could you see? God's got time of the same old scene. People go around doing the same old things. Oh yes, and they're living a life. Junkies passing on by. People go around playing the same old games. See, I don't want nothing bad to happen to you, my friend. People go around doing the same old things. Oh yeah, living a life. Junkies passing on by. People go around playing the same old games. People go around doing the same old things. People go around playing the same old games. People go around doing the same old things. And they're lying. People go around backbiting. People go around backsliding. People go around and they are living a life. Junkies passing on by. People go around.
Big Nephew Drew, one time for you. And we out. After that. Okay, the connection is interrupted. All right, well, that's that.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Keep waiting, yeah. Keep waiting. Oh, Jesus. And I believe it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Let me tell you. Oh, yeah. 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 Well, if you know, like I know, well, I done waited too long. He wants your love and devotion. Yeah. The jail's waiting for you and me right now. Yeah.
will be left behind. Gone on the shoreline. And Jesus always on time. And get off that shoreline. And start waiting on the Lord. He may not come when you want.
Peace and blessings to everybody, and good night. What's going on here? What'd you say? I'm plugging everybody. Gary Price of Omega Ministries, but please do not watch or listen to me if you are about that saved. Friend Spirit came into the school really early. Gary Price did. Okay, good night. Good night to you, Sister Cassie. And peace and blessings to everybody. Okay, I got to get out of here. I thank y'all. I thank y'all for joining. And I'll check everybody on Wednesday. Whatever you may want to say to me, if you've not had a chance to do that and you would like to, you can leave me an email at this address. There's a will, there's a way. Why this is so close, personal. But anyway, this is the number that you email me. Excuse me. This is the email address that you use if you want to write me a correspondence. If you would like to sow a seed by way of PayPal only, you can use the second address, Temple of the True Yahshua at yahoo.com. Both addresses will be in the description box. So again, if you want to reach me, this is how you beat me. brothermantheol@gmail.com. And I thank you all for joining. And I'll check y'all out Wednesday. Have a blessed rest.